Hello everyone and welcome to my Sunday Selfie Series. Today's experiment, I will be using two different tools. The first one is a grain stripping comb. It has three different sides. All three of the black little strips here come off. That one I'm having trouble with, but they come off for an easy cleanup. And they have different sizes each side. The second tool that I'm using is an adjustable stripping brush. Each of these brushes are very stiff, very hard, and they come off, I guess, also for very easy cleaning. I'm using Turquoise enamel house paint, it's a latex, and gold metallic paint. So I am so ready to get started. Let's do this. That's my photo for the week. I'll talk about that in a minute. One side of this will be wet on wet, and the other side will be wet on dry. So what is painted already is the wet on dry. It has a blue turquoise paint already there. I'm using the comb. I was a little nervous doing this at first, but very excited. That I'm going to let dry, and it does have a nice design to it. It doesn't show up so well here, but it does have a very nice design. The brush I'm doing wet on wet, so it's not going to dry between layers. I'm starting with the turquoise, piling it on, and I don't have the correct paper for this in the background. It began to wave on me, so I do need to get some kind of cardstock or art paper that I can paint on and it won't wave or buckle like this. But since it's an experiment, I really don't want to use something more or too expensive. I'm just playing. So the turquoise is still wet. I'm trying out the brush. And even though the brush gives a little bit once it's wet, it's still very stiff. And it glides very easily, very smoothly. I like it. I think it's something that you kind of have to play with and create your own designs with it. I watched Martha Stewart use it. I'm not Martha Stewart. But it's fun, and I think with practice, I don't know, I think I'll be pretty good at it. But I wanted to do this because a couple weeks ago, I needed black and white cardstock. I didn't have it. And the only thing I had was a box by Felicity Jane that had black and white stripes on it. And I used that for my background cardstock. And then another day, I wanted black and white cardstock again. And I didn't have any. So I used Tim Holtz Ideology tissue paper, which is very firm. It's not like tissue paper you get in a gift box. And it's a little more sturdier than that. But I put it over cardstock and that worked out fine. So of course that got me to thinking, what could I do? What could I create on my own one day when I don't have the background cardstock I like? Voila! Here we go. Anyway, I really like how the wet on wet came out. You could play with it while it's wet to get it to where you want it to be. So now I'm putting the gold over the turquoise. And once again, I'll try putting the comb over it and see what happens. The turquoise is totally dry, so there's absolutely no bleeding going from one color to the next. I'm getting a little heavy-handed here with the gold. But that looks really cool. The texture that comes through just using the comb. And so I decide to let that dry. And I am back to the wet on wet side. So what I really like about this is that you can continue to play with your colors while it's wet and work with the different color paint or that you're using to get the texture and the layers or whatever it is you want to do with the paint. You can just continue to play with it until it gets to where you want it to be. And I really like that brush. So I will definitely be using that again, and it looks really cool against my photo. The wet on dry takes a little longer to do that. And I'm showing you that the brush cleaned up really well, the Martha Stewart brush. So that was really great. But this is the comb that I'm using here. And I really like the textures. You can see the layers. It looks like diamonds and little blocks and all different types of designs in this. So the more you play with it, or pending what you do with the combs and which size comb you use, will depend upon what you end up with. So I'm showing that again. It's nice and dry. You can see it actually has some thick spots on it. So I'm back to combing. And I want more turquoise on this because I'm thinking this is going to be the background of the layout that I do today. And that did not come out the way I wanted it to. And I don't really want to wait. So when I saw Martha Stewart use her brush, when they made a mistake on the dry on wet, which is what the wet on dry, you could put your paint over it again and fool with it some more. So that's what I'm doing. And I want more gold, so I'm adding that in. And where it's going in the middle is mostly dry. So this time around, instead of letting everything dry all over again, I'm going to try and finish it. So I'm kind of mixing up the wet on dry and the dry on wet kind of technique for this part. But I do like using the comb. It just gives it a different effect depending what size comb you use. And wiping it off between each time you use it also helps so that you don't have a buildup of paint that begins to smush all over it and take away the design. But the design on this is really very nice. So I'm going to stop, let it dry, and it is dry. And it didn't take too long, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops. And I like it. I like it a lot. I'm definitely going to use both the comb and the brush in the future on the right type of paper. But you can see it really has great texture. If you could touch it and feel it, I want to say it's like scaly. That's the only thing I can think of to describe it as. So I thought I would make this whole segment about playing with paper because I collect tissue paper, all kinds of tissue paper from any box or package that it comes in. And instead of letting it sit there, I want to experiment and play with it a little bit more. And one thing I find about using tissue paper is that whenever I use a tape runner on it, it doesn't work so well. And maybe it's me and the tape runner or whatever, but when I'm putting it down on cardstock like this, it tends to work pretty well, that part. But when I put tissue paper on top of tissue paper, that becomes another story. Running the tape runner over the tissue, it doesn't always come as smooth because the tissue paper is very fragile, but I do it anyway. So I decided to use the brush style underneath my photo. I really liked the swirls, and I don't know, maybe it's because I felt more free doing the wet on wet than I did letting it dry between each layer. So working it until I could get it to where I want it to be will probably be more what I do in the future than letting it dry between each layer, unless I'm going for something particular. Like if I'm using tape to create a style, then the wet on dry technique is going to work far better than the wet on wet for me. And I put the tissue paper between these two layers. It doesn't work the same as fun foam or pop-up dots, but I was just curious if I would get any type of a lift between the two. And I'm sure if I put more tissue paper, I would. But it did give it a little poof. If that's okay, you can poof up your scrapbook page with a little tissue paper. There you have it. You heard it here first. So, anyway, I like mixing different types of textures. And so one of the things I wanted to experiment on this Sunday selfie thing is, playing with whatever I can, not just tools, but different textures and just seeing how things will work, or sometimes it's not going to work. I think right now I'm pretty lucky. The first two things kind of worked, even though my last experiment was working with a white cardstock background. That didn't kind of work for me because I don't like the white space left behind when you use white cardstock, or I use white cardstock. And every time I see someone else do it, I think it's lovely, but it's not for me. So now playing with this tissue paper and seeing what I can do with paper is my next fun thing to do here. So I'm twisting and turning and just wanting to know where I can go with this layout. So this Sunday Selfie Series is all about a safe spot where I can experiment, mess up, or maybe not mess up so badly, and learn something new, practice what I think I already know, try new tools and products, and play with the ones I already have and see what happens. My photo is from a game that was on Facebook. First of all, I only allow myself 15 minutes a day on social media, Facebook, but that does not include scrapbooking. So when I go to scrapbooking blogs, that's another story. But anyway, so I saw this game. It's at a place called nametest.com, and you press a button and it comes up and it gives you nutritional facts about yourself. And I read what they put on a friend of mine and I thought it was hysterical. And so I decided to use that photo because I realized I did not take a photo of myself this week that I was supposed to do to use for Selfie Sunday. So this is the photo that I have to use. Anyway, so I'm going to embellish this a little bit. I like twisting the paper. That worked out pretty nice. I like that bright red tissue paper. It's actually, I don't know where it's from, but I wish I had more of it. It's almost cloth-like. It's very soft and sturdy. So you can actually play with it and do things with it and twist it and probably tie it in knots and stuff like that. So that I like. So I'm going to jump to super speed until we get to the end of this. I'm going to add a few metal objects to the layout, and I think that will finish it. So hold on to your seats. We're going for a ride. So what did I learn today with this experiment? One, I will definitely be combing and brushing out future cardstock for myself, which is pretty neat. And I will most definitely use the right kind of cardstock to do this. I really like the effect. I think both of the tools I used today were awesome. So I am at the end here. That's a closer look. Thank you so much for joining me. It's going into this book, not a regular scrapbook. That was page number 1. I hope to see you next Sunday, and throughout the week I'm doing 100 layouts in 100 days. Do give me a thumbs up if you like what you see here. Come back again. Happy scrapbooking and have a wonderful day.